Michael Saylor has dropped a bombshell regarding crypto and Bitcoin, and many people are mocking him for it. But he might turn out to be right, because what Michael Saylor has done with MicroStrategy is something that many more companies will soon do more than we can imagine. And that would mean the end of Bitcoin and crypto as we know it. And sometimes when you wake up, you expect that something has changed. Not in a dramatic way, but just in a way that maybe something is different. Lately, Bitcoin accumulation has really ramped up because companies are turning away from the US dollar and putting their money into Bitcoin. The dollar is losing value rapidly, and it looks like that trend will continue. Just take a look at the DXY charts. It's really shocking how bad things already are, and the outlook for the next 5 to 10 years doesn't look much better. The situation isn't very positive for the euro either. Every day, more companies are saying that they want to buy Bitcoin and set up a Bitcoin reserve. The problem is, there isn't much Bitcoin left to get. 95% of it already belongs to wealthy people who never want to give up their coins. Bitcoin is becoming increasingly scarce on crypto exchanges. There hasn't been as little available as there is now for 7 or 8 years. Major players like MicroStrategy or BlackRock are constantly announcing that they want to buy more Bitcoin. They're raising $500 million, 1 or 2 billion, or even 2, 3, 5 billion just to get even more Bitcoin. Metaplanet is also getting involved and wants to grab 21,000 Bitcoin. When you hear that a company is buying 340 Bitcoin, you might not immediately think, wow, that's a huge portion of the total 21 million, and those coins are gone forever. And a company called Boxable has now announced that it is adding Bitcoin to its treasury reserves. Michael Saylor even said a few weeks ago that there are about 12,000 publicly listed companies worldwide. Now imagine how many of them could still jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon and probably will. Michael Saylor also explained in the Bloomberg interview that Bitcoin will rise to $1 million and that there will be no more crypto winters. And at what point do you see, winter coming again? Because that of this asset class, right? It's gone from 0 to 1,000, then to 20, and then back down to 3 or 4. Then it went up to 15, and now up to 110, then dropped again, and so on. Winter is not coming back. We are past that phase. If Bitcoin is not going to 0, it's going to $1 million, and you have all the evidence you need to determine that, right? The President of the United States has decided he supports Bitcoin. The cabinet supports Bitcoin. Scott Pezin supports Bitcoin. Paul Atkins has shown himself to be an enthusiastic believer in Bitcoin and digital assets. Kentex and the CFTC feel the same way. The banks are going to bring Bitcoin into their portfolios. Bitcoin has made it through its riskiest period. The selling pressure is correct. There are only 450 Bitcoin per day coming from natural sellers. Those are the miners. At this level, it works out to about $50 million worth of Bitcoin being supplied every day. If those $50 million are actually bought, then the price has to gradually rise to find a natural seller who is price sensitive. If you do the math, you'll see that the Bitcoin treasury companies themselves are buying up all the natural supply. BlackRock and the ETFs are buying another portion of it. And we have nation states, actors entering the space. I think if Bitcoin rallies, if it surges to 500 0 or 1 million, then maybe we could talk about it crashing from 200 0 per coin. But at the current price levels, it only takes 50 million to turn the entire shaft of the crypto economy. And you have the Trump Media Organization, which raised 2.5 billion euros. You have GameStop, which recovered 500 million euros.
You have my company, which... And if that happens, it would be truly dramatic. Companies and ETFs are buying up the entire Bitcoin supply. Michael Saylor also warned that companies that aren't doing particularly well or aren't as well known as Amazon, Google, or Apple will eventually have no other choice. They have to do what MicroStrategy did. Their stock price has risen by almost 3,000%. And that's just in 2 years. And the more Bitcoin you bought, the higher did your stock price climb. And of course, other companies are noticing this as well. And Michael Saylor says there are so many companies that no one is paying attention to. And if you want people to notice you again or pay attention to you, buy Bitcoin. And when the price of Bitcoin rises, the company becomes wealthier. And then the stock price shoots up. And just take a look at this, Michael Saylor's explanation. What he said about it is really incredible. And if more companies hear this and pay attention, it will be truly phenomenal. Bitcoin is the greatest digital transformation of the 21st century. It represents digital capital. Global monetary value is distributed across aspects that provide utility and others that supply capital. But risk destroys trillions of dollars every year, and investors will use digital capital in the form of Bitcoin to avoid this risk. Digital capital is economically and technically superior to physical capital, and it is a revolutionary development in the preservation of capital. The asset class itself is growing from trillions to hundreds of trillions of dollars. and it is supported by digital power as well as political and economic power. Bitcoin is the best asset you can evaluate. It makes much more sense to buy Bitcoin than to buy your own stock or to hold Bitcoin instead of holding bonds. If you're going to outperform, you're going to need Bitcoin. Fortunately, there is an alternative. Public support for Bitcoin is on the rise. As a support for the U.S. Bitcoin Strategic Reserve,
Sell them into Bitcoin this way, we wouldn't have to use any new dollars at all.
Wall Street support is also there.
I believe Bitcoin is legitimate, and the President of the United States says, never sell your Bitcoin, right? That's why we're entering year one of the crypto renaissance, and you have a choice to make. Cling to the past or embrace the future. Divest billions of dollars and slow your growth rate. Invest billions of dollars and accelerate your growth rate.
And then we also have Metaplanet. They've also added Bitcoin to their balance sheet, and their stock has risen by 700%. And another company announced a month ago that they would buy Bitcoin. Boom own 140% more in stock value. And just a few weeks ago, there was yet another company, no idea where they came from, but their stock also skyrocketed. More and more companies are doing this now and investing in Bitcoin. And then there's something else about Bitcoin itself. It's super rare. There are more millionaires and billionaires in the world than there are Bitcoins. Do you understand what that means? Not everyone can own a whole Bitcoin. If a company like MicroStrategy, for example, owns hundreds of thousands of them and keeps buying more, it becomes even scarcer. Many wealthy people will never be able to get their hands on a whole Bitcoin, at least not in the future, and not even now. Maybe it's even more Bitcoin than some millionaires or billionaires will ever have. Now, more recently, we've seen just steady progress of more wealth advisor adoption, more institutional adoption. It's been a mix of people for whom it's the first time they've invested in anything in the crypto space. And then on the other hand, you have lots of people who've been invested in Bitcoin for a long time and they're taking advantage of the ETP wrapper.
When it comes to the adoption by wealth advisors, I'm curious how far along you think we are in that. Are we in the early innings? Are we in the middle innings? I don't think we're in the 8th or 9th inning, but where would you put it very early?
I think that what we've seen is a concerted effort by most of the largest firms to progress through their diligence, their research, and their approval process. But as you all know, for new ETFs, it's typically a multi-year journey to get any sort of approval. We've seen that fast-tracked by a number of firms. When we talk about fast-tracking, we're talking about quarters, not months. And slowly but surely, you've seen, I think, an acceleration, particularly in the last couple of months, of more notable firms lowering barriers, granting approvals to their advisors to use these. And I think that's obviously set to continue.
And isn't it crazy that we've reached this point? Every day there are new companies buying Bitcoin, and as a result, there's less and less left to get. At some point, you might meet someone who proudly says, I have 5,000 Satoshis, 50,000 Satoshis. Often, people think of that as $340 rather than its real value, because that's all they can still afford for themselves. So if you want to build financial independence through Bitcoin and crypto, click the link in the description below the video and watch the related video, because one thing is certain, the dollar keeps getting weaker and weaker while the price of Bitcoin rises. And of course, the euro is also getting weaker. That means over time, you'll be able to buy less and less with the same amount in dollars. In 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years, this will become even more extreme. Some people even think that the old Bitcoin cycles are over, as Michael Saylor, for example, has said several times that we won't see another crypto winter. They now say we're in a long phase of growth, where the price increases by 10 to 40% every year, simply because there are fewer and fewer Bitcoins lying around on crypto exchanges. And by the way, a company from Norway, the Norwegian Block Exchange, has also just announced that they want to buy Bitcoin, which shows that the trend is continuing and Bitcoin is becoming increasingly scarce. And the shares of a company rose by 138% in a single day. Just because they said they simply announced that they want to buy Bitcoin, they plan to have 10 Bitcoins by the end of the month. More and more companies, that's a fact, are moving away from the US dollar or are instead adopting Bitcoin as a new currency, or they're adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets. They're not buying gold, silver, or real estate. No, they're betting on Bitcoin. By the way, Bitcoin has already been around for 15 or 16 years, and now companies are using Bitcoin as a reserve. What do you think will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Maybe Bitcoin will become increasingly scarce and eventually really expensive. Well, a lot of people aren't even aware of what's happening right now, not even those in the crypto world, and they're simply not prepared for what's going on. By the way, the Norwegian Block Exchange and Boxable are also buying Bitcoin, and I bet we'll be hearing even more about this soon, because things like this are happening almost every day now. I hope you enjoyed this, that you have a great day, and that you were able to take something away from it, no matter where you are right now. Thank you for watching, listening, liking, and supporting. We'll see each other again soon.